The book of Revelation, used and abused by many, avoided by also many, and intimately, deeply studied by few. So today I'll share with you how to read Revelation. Let's begin. Guys, I have the snoodles again. I'm sick and I've been crying all morning. It's a thing, okay? It's my new style. The girl with always a snotty nose. Yeah. Now, we've just had some family drama and I want to mention it because I think it's something that has made me feel really isolated in the past. Am I the only person with family drama? And no, I know I'm not. But in the Christian world, it's like not okay to talk about. And so I'm going to talk about it, which this totally applies to what we're talking about today. So just hang with me. We're in a situation where I'm like, I think these people are being a little selfish with this situation. And they're like, I think y'all are being a little bit selfish with your son's birthday party. And so I'm like, maybe so, I don't know. And we're just working through that. We're working through how to love each other, how to die to self and love another person. I bring this up because I think this applies to how we read Revelation. You know, we're making it about us. We're kind of me-centered, and we all are me-centered because we're all sinful human beings. But whenever we're reading the Bible, whenever we approach the scriptures, y'all know I talk about this a lot, we use a certain hermeneutic, which means like how we interpret the scriptures, how we read them and get the truth out of them, how we get a message from a 2,000-year-old book. You know, everybody has a hermeneutic. Everybody uses a hermeneutic, whether they know that word or not. And so today we want to kind of talk about a faithful hermeneutic to the book of Revelation. And you might notice it's not Revelations, it's Revelation, a single revelation of Jesus Christ that will get on a lot of people's nerves. In fact, my seminary professor, when he lectured on it, he was like, that's the first way to know if somebody is ignorant, is if they say revelations. And I was like, oh, a straight fire, spitting fire. But that's first off, it's a book that a lot of pastors try and avoid, or that's a book where a lot of pastors like to live. It tends to be one of the two ends of the spectrum. In hermeneutics in general, there's also kind of like a spectrum. There's people that want to take everything very literally. And then there's others through the history of time that have wanted to take everything very allegorically. So everything is a metaphor. You know, with Moses and the Red Sea, the waters didn't actually part. The reeds of the waters moved the waters apart, you know, whatever. It refers to Jesus as a lamb. Now, we're not going to be literalists and say that Jesus is a physical lamb. Like, no, we know that he's 100% God and 100% man. We're not expecting him to actually look like a lamb necessarily. You get what I'm saying? Like, so there's this aspect to where not everything's allegory, but also not everything's literal. So we as sinful human beings have made that spectrum, and we're not really looking to kind of fit God onto that spectrum. What we're trying to do is just kind of be faithful to the scriptures. Y'all know what I'm gonna say. Let's look at the context. Let's look at the context of the book because that is incredibly, really super important. And then we're going to talk about our hermeneutic. So first off, John, the apostle, wrote this. So along with like the Gospel of John and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, this is the same John. We're pretty sure this is the same John. Now, this letter was most likely written after Nero. So oftentimes you'll hear me talk about persecution in the early church. And Nero was a crazy guy. He like set Rome on fire and he loved persecuting the Christians. But this was so late into the game that this was probably like 94. Domitian, I think is how you say it. He reigned from 81 to 96. So somewhere in that realm. And he kind of enacted this law that everybody needed to worship him, emperor worship. I guess he was pretty insecure. Obviously, Christians took fault with that. Obviously, Christians were not going to worship him and make sacrifices or say that he's Lord. And this brought on the persecution, just like Nero. And so the church was going through a really hard time. And all the while, they were still waiting on Jesus to return, just like we are today. And so this letter is written to specific churches, which means like specific people during a specific area and time, which is important. And he's saying, hold fast to the faith. This is written to encourage you and give you hope. Did you catch that? So if you have ever like heard teaching about Revelation that was kind of like provoking fear or was meant to provoke fear, I would encourage you to lean away from that. If a letter is written specifically to bring hope and give the church hope and perseverance and encouragement, then a modern day interpretation of that shouldn't bring the opposite of hope. It should bring hope and encouragement and perseverance. I encourage you, think of this book as a letter, kind of, because it is written to a specific people group in a specific time. But think of it as apocalyptic literature because that's what it is. So apocalyptic literature was something very specific to Jews. It was very Jewish tradition. And he says it's prophecy. This is a vision or a prophecy, a message from God. It's about a consummation. Now, something important about this idea that it's written to a specific people group during a specific time is that it can't really mean to us what it didn't mean to them. Like there's people that will want to be like, okay, this two-headed monster on this random passage that doesn't make any sense clearly has to be the TV because a TV has two different antennas. That was one of the things I heard on Hal Lindsey when I was a kid and I walked out in the living room late at night. My dad was watching it. I would say that that's a really bad exegesis of the passage. Here in this type of literature, we see phrases like thus says the Lord, or even just like chapters or like visions, almost like different windows or doors opening up to different ideas or pictures that the Lord is giving John. And so it's not really like a linear story. It's not chronological at all. It's little snippets, little pictures. So that's why like chapter 12 talks about Jesus' birth. Like, you know, that's like way before them. And then they're also talking about like Revelation 19, like, and 21, what heaven's gonna look like, all nations or all ethnicities praising the Lord, this big heavenly feast. We ourselves tell stories out of line. I mean, even Marvel does that. You're watching a story about a hero and then you see snippets from his childhood and then you see snippets of like the current battle that he's in against the bad guys. And it builds the character, it builds the story, makes it that much more rich. That's the same here. You get snippets of different scenes and we have to use wisdom while reading those passages. With this type of literature, with this apocalyptic literature, it's not just about the future. It's also about the here and now to this set of people that John's writing to during this specific time. So there's gonna be things that they understand that is referenced to them. I mean, again, John is a first century Christian, so he's only going to be able to use like first century words and vocabulary and descriptions. He's going to describe things that they will understand. Very much like political cartoons are today. There's like exaggerated characteristics, or if you mention like orange hair, anybody in the United States will probably know exactly what political person you're referring to. Same here. He's referring to things that those first century Christians would have been like, oh yeah, we know what you're referring to. It's that person, or it's this thing, or that's Rome, or whatever. It's kind of like the 4th century when Augustine really focused on those 3 verses in like chapter 20 about the millennium. The church has been dissecting it and trying to figure out where we are. We're making it about us. Remember my first story about my son's birthday party? You know, we're making it about us. We're kind of me-centered, and we all are me-centered because we're all sinful human beings. But it's not about us. This is a 1st century letter to the churches, to the Christians, and it's this vision. It's not going to be exact because it's a vision. It's not a perfect picture or snapshot that's in a history book that we can then look at and get a prediction of exactly what it's going to look like. That's not the type of literature that it is. Like, yeah, it's fun to try and think like, what if Jesus comes next year? But it's not even going to look like what we expect it to. In fact, it's definitely going to come as a surprise. And Jesus says only the Father knows. He's content with not knowing about the return. So why do we have to figure it out? Like, why do us in our pride, dare I say it, why do we want to sit here and like mull over the details and try and figure out God, to have like him pinned down? Like, what is that? I don't know. It's funny. So this literature, to provide them hope, to give them encouragement and perseverance, really focused on pointing their eyes forward to Jesus, not to them getting it together, but just like being committed to their faith and following Christ, even if it cost them their everything. So us Christians today, we too can read this book and see kind of like a bird's eye view of the literature as a whole, not trying to understand every single symbol and every single character and every single thing, but see the promise that Jesus comes out on top, that Jesus conquers all, and that if we hold fast to our faith, we know that he will win out in the end. Even when it looks like all around us, our faith just leads to earthly death, we know that he conquers in the end. If you guys want more ideas on how to read the Bible, check out this playlist. And if you want a Bible study with me, check out this playlist. And I will see you guys in these videos. Okay, bye guys.